The Al-Aqsa lies at the heart of Jerusalem's old city, on a hill known to Jews as Temple Mount and to Muslims internationally as a noble sanctuary. Muslims regard the site as the third holiest in Islam after Mecca and Medina. Al-Aqsa is the name given to the whole compound and is home to two Muslim holy places, the Dome of the Rock and the Al-Aqsa Mosque, also known as the Qibla Mosque. Meanwhile, the compound overlooks the Western Wall, a sacred place of prayer for Jews for whom the Temple Mount is their most sacred site. Jews believe biblical King Solomon built the first temple there 30 years ago. A second temple was raised by the Romans in 70. And because of its importance, the Al-Aqsa compound has long been a flashpoint for deadly violence over matters of sovereignty and religion in Jerusalem. Not only that, despite the prohibitions related to archaeology, this is still a place where Jews always want to explore to find the best answers to their questions. And you know what? The discoveries have been revealed. This comes as shocking news to all religious people around the world. Are you curious? Let's dive deeper into today's video. The crowning achievement of King Solomon's reign was the erection of the magnificent temple in the capital city of ancient Jerusalem. His father, King David, had wanted to build the great temple generation earlier as a permanent resting place for the Ark of the Covenant, which contained the Ten Commandments. A divine edict, however, had forbidden him from doing so. "You will not build a house for my name." God said to David, "For you are a man of battles and have shed blood." 1 Chronicles 28:3. There's a long-standing history of archaeologists searching for, and even claiming to have discovered signs of Israel's might during the time of King Solomon. At one point, nearly a century ago, excavators said they discovered Solomon's stables at a site called Megiddo, the focus of the biblical story of Armageddon. The Bible says that Megiddo and two other cities were used to house the horses and horsemen for his legendary chariots. However, digs in more recent years have failed to find any evidence of horse bones or other obvious signs of a cavalry. There are no signs of Solomon's Israel at all so far. Other researchers have looked for Solomon's fabled mines. These would have been vital to secure the precious minerals and wealth needed to construct the first temple. Many have come up empty-handed, but in research published in 2017, archaeologists said they found evidence of extensive ancient mining of copper in a nearby part of Jordan. The period seems to match up. And if Israel held control of the area back then, it might have been a key source of minerals and wealth. Beyond archaeological finds, biblical historians have found other reasons to doubt the traditional stories of Solomon. For starters, the text contains a number of fantastical claims. Over the course of his life, the Bible says Solomon married some 700 wives and 300 concubines, a number that stretches the imagination. One of those wives was also said to be the Pharaoh's daughter. However, Egyptian records don't preserve such a matrimony. Some scholars say the pharaohs were notoriously unwilling to marry out their daughters for fear of losing power. Beyond archaeological finds, biblical historians have found other reasons to doubt the traditional stories of Solomon. For starters, ultimately, the biggest hindrance to finding King Solomon's temple also cuts to the core of why it's so interesting to us in the first place. The kingdom of Israel would eventually reshape the world's culture and religions. And the Temple Mount in Old Jerusalem, home to both the first temple and second temple, is perhaps the holiest site in the so-called Holy Land. For thousands of years, Jewish, Muslim, and Christian religious leaders built new structures in the area, burying the old holy sites with new ones. Christians believe that Jesus visited the Temple Mount, then home to the second temple, and criticized the religious figures of the day before, supposedly predicting the site would be destroyed. And in the Islamic faith, the Temple Mount is where the Prophet Muhammad ascended into heaven. It's also the site of the still standing Dome of the Rock, one of the oldest Islamic buildings in the world, built over the Second Temple centuries after it was destroyed by the Romans in 70 AD. If any remnants of King Solomon's temple do still exist, they're buried beneath many layers of politically charged history. All the activity and intertwined religious history make digging here impossible. However, curiosity about what was hidden under the Al-Aqsa Church prompted Jews to explore. They discovered unexpected things that surprised not only their religion, but also Muslims. What is beneath the Temple Mount? Archaeologists discovered a large hothouse covered in plastic sheets and marked Temple Mount salvage operation. One morning on the southern slope of Mount Scopas, a hill on the northern outskirts of Jerusalem, they saw 3 rows of black plastic buckets, each half filled with stones and pebbles. Then pointed out a dozen wood frame screens mounted on plastics. A chunk of what looked like conglomerate rock turned out to be plaster used to line cisterns during the time of Herod the Great, some 20 years ago. They spotted the handle of an ancient piece of pottery, complete with an indentation for thumb support. And they retrieved a rough-edged coin, minted more than one, 500 years ago, bearing the profile of a Byzantine emperor. The odds and ends they were gathering are the fruits of one of Israel's most intriguing archaeological undertakings. A grain-by-grain analysis of debris struck out of the Temple Mount, the magnificent edifice that has served the faithful as a symbol of God's glory for 0 years, and remains the crossroads of the 3 great monotheistic religions. Jewish tradition holds that it is the site where God gathered the dust to create Adam and Eve, and where Abraham nearly sacrificed his son Isaac to prove his faith. King Solomon, according to the Bible, built the first temple of the Jews on this mountaintop circa 1000 BC, only to have it torn down 400 years later by troops commanded by the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar, who sent many Jews into exile. In the 1st century BC, Herod expanded and refurbished the Second Temple, built by Jews who had returned after their banishment. It is here that, according to the Gospel of John, Jesus Christ lashed out against the money changers and was later crucified a few hundred yards away. The Roman general Titus exacted revenge against Jewish rebels, sacking and burning the temple in AD 70 among Muslims. The Temple Mount is called the Noble Sanctuary. They believe it was here that the Prophet Muhammad ascended to the divine presence on the back of a winged horse. The miraculous night journey, commemorated by one of Islam's architectural, the Dome of the Rock Shrine, a territorial prize occupied or conquered by a long succession of peoples, including Jebusites, Israelites, Babylonians, Greeks, Persians, Romans, Byzantines, early Muslims, Crusaders, Mamluks, Ottomans, and the British. The Temple Mount has seen more momentous historical events than perhaps any other 35 acres in the world. Nonetheless, archaeologists have had little opportunity to search for physical evidence to sort legend from reality. For one thing, the site remains a place of active worship, the authority that controls the compound. An Islamic council called the Waqf has long forbidden archaeological excavations, which it views as desecration, except for some clandestine surveys of caves, cisterns, and tunnels undertaken by European adventurers in the late 19th century, and some minor archaeological work conducted by the British from 1938 to 1942, when the Al-Aqsa Mosque was undergoing renovation. The layers of history beneath the Temple Mount have remained tantalizingly out of reach. Thus, we realize the significance of those plastic buckets of debris they saw on Mount Scopas. Today, the Temple Mount, a walled compound within the old city of Jerusalem, is the site of 2 magnificent structures: the Dome of the Rock to the north and the old Al-Aqsa Mosque to the south. In the southwest stands the Western Wall, a remnant of the Second Temple and the holiest site in Judaism. Some 300 feet from the Al-Aqsa Mosque, in the southeast corner of the compound, a wide plaza leads to underground vaulted archways, that have been known for centuries as Solomon's stables. With the approval of the Israeli government, the Waqf announced plans to create an emergency exit for the Al-Marwani Mosque. But Israeli officials later accused the Waqf of exceeding its self-stated mandate. Instead of a small emergency exit, the Waqf excavated 2 arches, creating a massive vaulted entranceway. In doing so, bulldozers dug a pit more than 131 feet long and nearly 40 feet deep. Trucks carted away hundreds of tons of soil and debris. Israeli archaeologists and scholars raised an outcry. Some said the Waqf was deliberately trying to obliterate evidence of Jewish history. Others laid the act to negligence on a monstrous scale. That earth was saturated with the history of Jerusalem, says A.L. Myron, a historian at the Benz V Institute for the Study of Eretz Israel. A toothbrush would be too large for brushing that soil, and they did it with bulldozers. Yusuf Natcher, the Waqf's chief archaeologist, was not present during the operation, but he told the Jerusalem Post that archaeological colleagues had examined the excavated material and had found nothing of significance. The Israelis, he told me, were exaggerating the value of the found artifacts. And he bristled at the suggestion. The Waqf sought to destroy Jewish history. Every stone is a Muslim development. He says, if anything was destroyed, it was Muslim heritage. Some discoveries provide tangible evidence of biblical accounts. Fragments of terracotta, figurines from between the 8th and 6th centuries BC may support the passage in which King Josiah, who ruled during the 7th century, initiated reforms that included a campaign against idolatry. Other findings challenge long-held beliefs. It is widely accepted that early Christians used the mount as a garbage dump. On the ruins of the Jewish temples, but the abundance of coins, ornamental crucifixes, and fragments of columns found from Jerusalem's Byzantine era, D 300A 638, suggests that some public buildings were constructed there. But Natcher, the Watch chief archaeologist, dismisses these finds because they were not found in situ in their original archaeological layers. In the ground, it is worth nothing. He says of the sifting project, adding that Barkai has leaped to unwarranted conclusions in order to strengthen the Israeli argument that Jewish ties to the Temple Mount are older and stronger than those of the Palestinians. We can see that there's a great deal of evidence that indicates that Solomon's building of the temple is just one of the lies of the Jews. The evidence for that is abundant, some of which may be deduced from what the Jews themselves have written about the temple. There is no authentic source to prove that Solomon built this temple. The Holy Quran tells us the story of Dawood and Sulaiman in numerous places. And it tells us the story of Sulaiman and Balkis in the hoopoe and the ant and the jinn. Some of these events would appear to be of less importance than the temple. So why does the Quran not speak about the temple if it was as holy and significant as the Jews say? This temple is not mentioned anywhere except in the books of the Jews, the content of which cannot be trusted, even the Bible itself. Many Jewish and Christian scholars and historians have admitted that the Bible has been subjected to distortion, tampering, additions, and subtractions, which means that it cannot be regarded as a reliable historical source. It has no chain of narration going back to Moses or to any of the prophets who came after him, and their history is written in that book. Regarding the first and second books of Kings, which are the books that speak about the temple, the Jews say that their author was Jeremiah the prophet, but this is false, because the events described in the second book go beyond the era of Jeremiah. So it does not make sense that he could have been its author. Hence, many scholars and historians express doubts about these two books. The French scholar Dr. Maurice Bucale says that scholars doubt the historical value of the books of Samuel and the books of Kings, as they mix historical events with myths. They contain multiple errors, and a single event may be recounted twice or even 3 times. Moreover, the scholars doubt the first and second books of Chronicles, which also mention the building of Solomon's temple. Many Jewish and Christian scholars also doubt the entire Old Testament and do not regard it as an authentic source. The building of the temple is a matter of myth and imagination. The Jews attributed it to Sayyidina Suleiman, but the story of the temple building is not recognized by history, and there is no source for it except the books of the Jews. The books of the Bible which speak of the temple contradict one another, which indicates that it is not a holy book and was not revealed by Allah. Rather, it is the writings of human beings which are falsely attributed to Allah. They claim that these books are a revelation from God to the prophets who came after Solomon. So it is impossible that there could be any difference or contradiction between them. The one who studies the Bible text having to do with the building of the temple will be astonished and shocked, and he will be certain that the story of its construction is a myth and fable that has no basis in reality. That is because the texts describe an immense structure, perhaps one of the greatest buildings known to humanity. The materials used in its construction and the number of workers are imaginary, exaggerated beyond the bounds of logic. These lies and exaggerations have no aim except to imbue this alleged structure with a kind of grandeur and majesty. The Jews themselves did not agree on one temple or one location. The Jews of the kingdom of Samaria say that the temple was in the city of Nablus, not in Jerusalem. Others say that it was in the village of Bitin, north of Jerusalem. A third group says that their temple was built on the hill of Dan, and so on. All of this confirms that the story of the temple is a myth, because none of these structures exist and no trace of them has ever been found. Those who mention these structures affirm that they were completely destroyed. Jerusalem was destroyed in 70 CE and became ruins, including the temple. Searching for a building that was completely destroyed 20 years ago is utterly pointless. The historical evidence indicates that the one who built Al-Aqsa was Ibrahim or his grandson, Yaqub. That was hundreds of years before Suleiman. So it does not make sense to suggest that Suleiman would destroy a place that was built by a prophet like him for the worship of Allah. May he be exalted for the sake of building a temple on it. The Jews claim that the Wailing Wall is part of their alleged temple. This claim was disproven and demonstrated to be false by modern scientific studies. An international committee was sent to investigate the events of al-Buraq. That took place in 1936. The committee's work was scientific and historical, and the committee proved in its report that the Buraq Wall belonged to the Arabs. If we assume, for the sake of argument, that this temple existed, that Dawood is the one who laid the foundations for the building of this temple, and that his son Suleiman is the one who completed it, then we Muslims are more entitled to this temple than the Jews, because this temple was built by Dawood and Suleiman to be a place of worship for those who believed in them and all the prophets and messengers. So it is a temple for the monotheists who believed in the prophets and worshipped Allah. May he be exalted and affirmed his oneness. And it is not a temple for the killers of the prophets or for those who disbelieved in Dawood and Suleiman and denied their prophethood and claimed that they were merely two kings, and even attributed to them polytheism and idol worship. We, the Muslims, have a greater right to that temple if it exists because we believe in them as two of the noble prophets of Allah. May he be exalted. What is known to the Jews is that the Bible was written during the period of captivity in Babylon. And we have noted above that the Jews were allowed to return to Palestine after many years of captivity. Perhaps the writers added some fables about the temple to encourage the Jews to return to Jerusalem. All this evidence and more indicates that the issue of the temple is a mere lie that was written by the authors of the Bible and attributed to God to connect the Jews to that city and encourage them to return to it, based on the argument that their kingdom could not be complete except by rebuilding this alleged temple. And Allah knows best. What do you think about this? Please give us a like and let us know in the comment section. And that's all about today's video. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the bell to watch the latest videos from us. Hope to see you in the next videos. Goodbye.